Well, now, if I'm not mistaken, we're going to be moving on to a little bit more my territory and what I'm most familiar with and the biggest fan of, and that would be the adjacent and concurrent Saturday morning Sonic cartoon. Am I correct? That's what we're going with next?
Oh yeah. And
All
you're thinking
right.
if that the cartoon is just called Sonic the Hedgehog, but like for people online or whatever, because again, two cartoons, it's usually called Saturday, well, SatAM or Sonic SatAM or something like that to
SatAM,
separate them.
SatAM.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Where's SatAM?
officially it's just Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah.
Yeah, that ran for 2 13-episode seasons on ABC from September 18th of 93 through December 3rd of 94. So it had a, respectable if short run. That's part of why this show kind of got swallowed up in the ether because shows that only aired on Saturday morning very rarely had enough episodes to be sold as a package.
Yeah.
Usually for syndication, you need at least 65 episodes. So that's why the Saturday morning show, after its initial airing, it was a show where, like, if you didn't see it, you didn't see it, pretty much. Like, you missed it if you didn't watch it. My wife was always like, I don't remember seeing it too much. Part of that was because the second season, they really were screwing with the time slot. They were bouncing it around. We'll talk about that a little bit later on.
Oh my! Oh, okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go.
But yeah, it had a good run, but a short run. And then, after it was canceled, it only ever showed up like when USA bought the rights to the other show. They got the rights to this show too. It's kind of like a gimme or a bonus or whatever.
Yeah.
So you rarely got one show without the other because this show on its own didn't have enough episodes to be syndicated singularly. You'd run out of episodes literally in less than a month. So it's like you couldn't run it in syndication. So that worked against it. But talk about night and day, like compared to Adventures. This show came out 2 weeks after Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, and I remember the feeling generally being among most of the fans like, okay, this was the show we thought we were getting based on what you told us originally. Because it had all the characters from the comics. It was a little bit more serious. It was a little bit more of a 90's show. It felt like a 1993 cartoon. It had a loose continuity, but it did have continuity. First season was very singularly episodic because partly they wanted it to be easy to air in reruns, but also because for some stupid reason, they aired the first episode live on Saturday mornings completely out of order. Like, that was another thing. This show had a lot of things working against it from the beginning. If you have the DVD set, they have all the episodes arranged in an order that makes storyline sense, even though there's no actual arc that links the first 13 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
They just arrange them in a way that if you watch them this way, you get the most out of it. It makes the most sense. But if you watched them as they aired in 1993, a lot of that effect was lost because they aired them in a very random order. And it just sort of made things a little bit lackluster if you were trying to, like, follow along. And it made certain elements a little bit more confusing than they necessarily have to be. The second season, they kind of fixed that. But at the same time, there were other drawbacks to the second season. But we'll talk about that. But yeah, I was a big fan immediately because, again, I was already reading the comic book. I picked up the comic literally with the first issue. I just happened to be at the 7-Eleven when issue 0 came out. And I thought it was fantastic. I liked the games, but the games had barely any story, so I liked having characters to relate things to. I liked that you had this ensemble cast of characters that had each been affected by Robotnik and the war, and, not just how Sonic related to this villain, but, like, this guy took over a whole planet, so seeing this resistance force come up against him, it was a little bit Star Wars-y. And it was cool. Like, you had this rebellion, right? Freedom fighters. So I thought all those elements were really, really cool. Some people didn't like them because they're like, well, it took focus away from the singular Sonic versus Robotnik conflict. kind of, but another way to look at that is that it expanded upon it, because realistically, if this were a living world and these events were happening, it enriches the material, to my feeling, to have these other characters who were also affected by the plot. And a lot of that got pared back in the second season anyway, so it's not even really that much of a thing worth complaining about. But I liked it. I like ensemble casts anyway, generally speaking. But I like things that, a show that feels like it's actually a living world with stakes and things like that, where things feel like they matter. I mean, here's something you can compare to, right? When we watched Super Mario Brothers Super Show, we talked about this on the last podcast. Monday through Thursday, you had this one cartoon, which was a Mario cartoon, and it was very safe, very simple, very low stakes, very much for the kids, and very attractive in its own way for what it did. And then every Friday, you had this Zelda cartoon, which was much more sophisticated, much more serious, much more plot-oriented, less silly, and you looked forward to that, and it gave you a completely different kind of hit. Right. So these two Sonic cartoons were very much in that same thing. Like the Mario cartoon was to adventures the way that the Zelda cartoon was to the Saturday morning cartoon. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I really liked that about it. The plot was basically, you had this resistance force, the Freedom Fighters, who were led by Princess Sally, whose parents had disappeared when Robotnik took over. And that kind of made it sort of shifted the plot. Some people didn't like that because it kind of made the thing more about him and her, and Sonic is more like her weapon in the fight. But I mean, it's a way to go. I thought that was fine. So there's these resistance forces that are fighting Robotnik the whole time, and he's turned most of the population into robots, and they're basically trying to take back their world by any means necessary. And it's really cool. I really liked that they went heavy and tried to add a lore to something that didn't have any at the time. I mean, It was wide open canvas to play with. I really liked the cast of characters they came up with. I liked seeing them animated after seeing them in a comic book for a full year. I thought that was fantastic. They all sounded and acted exactly like I pictured in my head. But that's the thing. Like, some people weren't reading the comics, so they didn't give a shit about this show. But if you were reading the comic, the show was like more than you could have hoped for, I swear to God. Because the comic was already kind of starting to shift gears into becoming a little bit more serious also, because they wanted the comic to match the show.
Yeah, because in the first couple of issues, it was very goofy and slapstick. I do give it credit, though. The comic book did something both cartoons didn't do too much. It actually added, like, the actual in-game enemies, like the bugs and the robot, the spiders and all the things you face in the actual games and everything. The only thing that kind of bugged me, I mean, as a kid, I did see it as the more serious show, and Robotnik was definitely more threatening. It just kind of bugged me that Tails, the actual, canon video game character, barely did anything. Because, like, I know he's a kid, but still, you play the games, you don't have Sally running around or Rotor running around. You have Sonic and Tails. So, yeah.
The thing with that was the idea, and they started to execute it, but because the planned third season never happened, they never really got to expand upon it as much as they hoped. Mm-hmm. But there was supposed to be sort of an arc with Tails where as time went on, he would kind of age up a little bit and level up. And there was one episode specifically that kind of dealt with that. It was like he was like, I'm sick of being treated like a little kid, and that was sort of like the backdoor for that idea being explored, and going forward, if the show had its third season, he would have started to kind of come into his own more. But they kind of were holding him back in the first bunch, sort of for that reason. But also, yeah, it's hard to write a little kid into the mix of the plot with the situations that were happening. That was another issue that they had. Everybody got scaled way back for season 2 because the budget got redirected. I don't necessarily want to say cut, but it did get, they had certain things they had to adhere to for the second season. They redrew a lot of the characters, and that ate up a bunch of money. So to compensate for that, they ended up not using a bunch of the characters anymore most of the time for season 2. because they didn't have the budget to pay the voice actors, and they didn't
jeez.
have the animation to use the characters. So for season 2, it pretty much got pared down to almost always Sonic and Sally, with very little of the others at all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, most of what Tails and Rotor had been doing, most of what everybody got to do had pretty much got put on Sally at that point, because she was already there and established anyway. So, and she was already kind of good with computers. So in season 1, if they needed something mechanical done or whatever, they would have Rotor do it generally. Make a lot of noise over there. And sorry, my
Don't matter.
and so like then by season 2, they had to decide, okay, well, we could write Rotor into this scene, and then we pay the voice actor, and we got to use the animation cell, or we could just have Sally be good with tools and computers, and then we save a lot of money. So she became a lot more prominent, which is good if you're a fan of her like I am, but at the same time, Tails got put in the background, Rotor got put in the background with season 2. A lot of the characters that they were trying to establish more, because they wanted it to be a more serialized show. Season 2 did become that. Season 1 was more episodic. Season 2 was starting to link and did have an overall arc for the season with a beginning, middle, and end. It didn't go in a straight line. There were like side episodes that were not necessarily, filler, I guess you want to say.
Yeah.
But the season did have a beginning, middle, and an end. So it was like they had ambitions, but they didn't necessarily have the scale or the canvas to paint out their grand plan. Like I said, it was supposed to be at least one more season. And they did season 2 with the intention and knowledge of that.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of adjustments that were being made along the way, and things that they hoped they would get a chance to develop and were told they were going to get a chance to. And then they got the rug pulled out from under them, and they couldn't do any of it. So it ends not necessarily on a cliffhanger. Well, yeah, it does end on a cliffhanger.
It was a cliffhanger.
Oh, yeah.
But the Robotnik storyline had been resolved. So it works sort of on that level, but it does end on a way that makes you go like, wait, well, what happens next? So
Yeah. So name off the characters, kind of get, since this one has a more of a cast, you want to name them off real quick, or?
Yeah,
Antoine.
Yeah.
Rotor.
Yeah, so I guess Sonic was basically Sonic. He was, pretty cocky, kind of full of himself. Like you said, he was kind of like Sally's weapon against stuff, because he was kind of like the, punch first, ask later. And of course, he's got to run around. So he's impatient. He wants to run, do action. He got the new catchphrase, let's juice, which sounds different nowadays. You don't want Sonic to be juicing now, but it's like, and all that. And,
yeah, I'm always whenever he's like, I got a juice, I'm like the Mark McGuire, Bubba.
Yep.
Like the Batty Bombs.
Oh, God. Tails, which we mentioned, was barely there. He's there because he's in the game. So, Sally, I think we kind of went to her backstory. Bunny Rabbit was, there we go. Bunny Rabbit was, I think she was like partly roboticized, but they saved her before she was completely roboticized. So that's why she's got like a robot arm, a robot leg, or both robot legs, I think.
Yeah. I forget if I think the show might have mentioned it, but she originally debuted in the comic about a year before the show came out. So they showed her origin definitively in the comic book. Yeah, she was about to be roboticized, and they saved her, but it was only or kind of too late. So she got halfway through it. So thanks to that, she has kind of like super strength and speed and, gadgets and whatnot that can be adapted and modified. But, part of her character's arc is she's always trying to return back to normal one day. So that's...
and, of course, she's got the Southern drawl that was made popular with Rogue.
It was Christine Cavanaugh, Christine Cavanaugh was very popular back then. She would do a lot of cartoons.
R.I.P.
Yeah, no longer with us, unfortunately, which... Yeah, she dropped off the scene. I believe she had health problems, something. They kind of kept it under wraps, but I remember something happened like way back in early 2000s. And at that point they mentioned that due to like health problems, she wasn't going to be doing anything anymore.
Yeah, that's why she didn't voice Chucky and Rugrats All Grown Up. I mean, I was kind of surprised at that, but...
I heard a story that she was involved, and again, this was something I remember at the time. I think her family kind of influenced, I don't want to say definitively because I don't know, but this is what I suspect happened. I think for privacy and whatnot, her family didn't want the details out. Because at a time, you could read about this, like, when it was new, but you can't find it now. So I kind of think that her family might have, like, respectfully wanted people to just kind of mind their business about it. The story I heard back in, like, 2001 or whenever it happened when her health problem started was that she was in some kind of accident and had suffered issues with her memory and her brain.
Oh, wow.
And so she had like huge lapses and like couldn't remember she had a lot of amnesia. So and I think that was it makes sense. I don't know for sure definitively because again, this was a story that was everywhere for about a year and now you can't find it. So I have my ideas as to what happened. And I know recently, I forget what year, but then they announced that she had since passed away. But there was like that 10 or 15-year gap where there was no information or news about her whatsoever to be found. So what makes the most sense is that there was like some sort of medical problem, I'm sure, and her family didn't want anybody prying, so they just kind of kept it very under wraps, which makes sense, you know. But yeah, it was always very mysterious. It was always very mysterious because she was so prevalent. I mean, she was on Adventures of Pete and Pete, you know, Rugrats. She did a lot of things, Christine Cavanaugh. So, and all of a sudden there was like nothing ever again, right? So, but yeah, something bad happened and it was very unfortunate, very tragic, but, you know, that's real life, you know. What can you do? But yeah, she definitely brought Bunny Rabbit to life. She sounded, everybody said she sounds exactly like what you would expect her to sound like from reading her in the comic book. So very iconic portrayal there for one of her last voice acting roles.
Yeah. We also had Antoine, who was the, I guess, stereotypical cowardly French person that had a crush on
I liked him.
I know, but just felt bad. I mean, did he ever do anything useful in the show?
He had I can't recall offhand, but I think he did have like a moment type thing, you know, prove that he is brave and all that stuff, you know.
Yeah, I think
I just can't remember. I can't remember. Like
I remember the one episode where he wanted to prove like he tricked Robotnik into falling into a hole, but he didn't know that Robotnik could just fly out of it or whatever. But that would have been kind of cool for him had it worked, right? I mean, he tricked Robotnik into, you know.
And I remember one of the most prominent things I remember about Antoine, well, there was two things. Number one,
Rob Paulson.
I was going to say that.
That was Rob Paulson? Jeez.
Yes, that was Rob
Paulson. I gotta
You didn't know that was Rob Paulson?
Yeah, I mean,
he sounds a bit.
He has a particular voice, but I guess maybe with the accent, I just couldn't pick it up. Like,
well, the thing is, I'm hearing Dr. Scratch and Sniff a little bit when he does Antoine. So
yeah,
that's just.
I was gonna say, like, as much as a lot of people hate Antoine because he does get a lot of shade. I've seen him even show up on lists of like all-time worst cartoon characters and things like that. And I mean, I love to binge this show once every year or so. Because it's an easy one to get through, 26 episodes. You can get through it in a very short weekend. It's a very brisk watch. It's you know, even if you don't love the show and just like it, you can get through it like that. So, and it might change your mind if you haven't seen it in a while. So I do recommend binge watching it if you can find it. I think it's available online for free. But yeah, when you do that though, Antoine becomes very annoying very quickly, especially because he actually got put into more season 2 episodes. I talked before about how everybody else got scaled back, but Antoine got amped up in season 2 because ABC thought the first season was a little too dark and they wanted more humor in season 2. So for season 2, there were 2 episodes that were split episodes, which meant instead of having one singular segment for 25 minutes, they had like 2 12-minute segments.
Yeah.
And they were usually Antoine segments. And they were definitely the most comedic segments of the entire run of the show. They were the silliest episodes. So they really stand out jarringly against the rest of the show being very to the bone. And this one is like very much goofier, more slapsticky. You know, there's one where like him and Sonic are roommates because Antoine's house gets messed up or something. And like, it's just about how much he annoys Sonic and gets on his nerves and shit. It's like they feel almost like they belong on the other show. in a sense. So, but that was a mandate. They were like, we need more Antoine and more goofy humor for season 2. So, okay, we all had to sit through that. You also, I mean, that's the thing. Season 2 was a mixed bag in that you got some of the worst episodes of this whole series, but you also got some of the best, especially the 2-part time travel episode and then the series finale. So season 2 was kind of all over the place with that. But yeah, Antoine, he was Rob Paulson. So even if you hate the character, you got to kind of have a soft spot for him because who doesn't love Rob Paulson in anything? You know, surprised you didn't recognize him. I bet Johnny recognized him.
I don't know if he remembers the show. Do you remember the show from back then, Johnny?
I don't have much memories of the show, and I think it has more to do with the scheduling because it's super early in the morning, and I don't know if I was able to watch all the episodes in the morning. I remember more of the other Sonic cartoon, but the thing that I do.
Part of it was that this show at times aired against Ninja Turtles in the same time slot. So
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
So
we also have I don't know if you have
Power
the story
Rangers.
behind. Yeah, I don't know if you have the story behind this one or not, but we also have Rotor, who was originally named Boomer in Archie comics.
I forgot to mention, because we're going to talk about that in a second, exactly what you just mentioned, how he was Boomer in the comics first.
Yeah.
But Antoine, he was the first character to have a discrepancy and show that the show and the comic existed in different universes. Because in the comic book, his name was Antoine Decoulé. And then in the show, it's Antoine Depardieu, like Gerard Depardieu.
Oh, I didn't know he had a last name in the cartoon. Or I thought it was just the same one from the comic. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was Decoulé in the comic book, and he was Depardieu in the cartoon show. So yeah, but then just like that, in the comic book, Rotor was Boomer originally, and then they flipped it to Rotor by the time the cartoon came out. So
yeah, did they ever explain why?
In the comic, they tried to retcon it by saying that Boomer was a nickname, but it didn't really. Nobody really believed it because they said it had to do with his voice. But if you watch the cartoon, his voice is very soft and high pitched, so Boomer doesn't fit him at all. I mean, honestly, if you had to pin me down, I'd say it was a fat joke.
Could be. Now, I know that nowadays people would really meme the hell out of it. There was some episode or something where he's fixing something. He's like, hey, Sonic, pass me that wrench. Okay, Boomer. You know they would meme that. You know they would.
No, but yeah, so yeah, he was he actually got a new art style for season 2 also. They came over, he had a whole different character model, different hat, everything.
Oh wow, I gotta watch. I haven't seen, I think we only saw season 1. I think what happened was one of those later cartoons before Johnny and I moved to Mexico, and since everything in Mexico takes like a good year or two before whatever gets brought over, like we never got to see the second season. In fact, I remember and I don't know if you can remember, Johnny, you remember this, but like the X-Men were just starting their second season. And I remember, I think it was the episode where Gambit had that ex-wife or fiance of his or something and made Rogue jealous. Like right in the middle of that episode was when they were like, okay, Mark and Johnny, let's go. So that's the thing. We literally were watching the middle of an X-Men episode, which was new at the time, before we had to like carry our luggage and, leave Chicago like for the last time ever, which we still have not. Well, I mean, I guess crossing airports, we've been in Chicago once or twice was not the same thing, you know what I mean? But that was like literally the last time we ever saw our old house and everything and left our town and everyone we knew was right in the middle of an X-Men episode. So yeah, we never got to see the second season of the Sonic show, the Sonic Saturday one.
Well, there's ways to very easily differentiate which season you're watching because the entire show had a visual overhaul for season 2. So they added some characters. Dulcie the Dragon, voiced by Cree Summer. Penny from Inspector Gadget. Foxy from Drawn Together. Cree Summer, she's
Cree Summer was everywhere.
So, and Kath Susay.
I think of a different world. And Penny.
She was everywhere. Of course, we talked briefly. We'll come back to Sally, but that was Kath Susay. So yeah, Cree Summer was Dulcie the Dragon. So if you're seeing her, that's season 2. Rotor had a different design and wore a red baseball cap in season 2. He looked totally different in season 1. And Sally had a complete redesign. They added black pupils to her eyes, and they gave her a vest. So if she's wearing a vest, it's season 2.
Oh, I didn't know. I thought the vest. I thought she always had the vest. I never. Huh?
Season 1, she doesn't have the vest. Sometimes she has a backpack.
Maybe that's why I confused it for the backpack.
And then but season 2, she has the vest with no explanation. In the comic book, there's a whole story behind it, and she acquires the vest in a hope chest that her teacher, mentor slash had left her when she passed away. So that the vest is like an heirloom. So, and she's grateful for pockets. So she loves the vest. So that became canon after that. So that's her iconic wardrobe was the vest. So yeah, if she's wearing a vest, that's season 2.
Interesting. So the other thing is, of course, the bad guys, you got Robotnik, but now he's way more dangerous, more evil. I mean, he fucking conquered the world in this version. Voiced by Jim Cummings, of course. And his voice is very good indeed, you know?
Yeah.
Like I said, I want to meet him someday. If we ever meet Jim Cummings, even though I know people are going to visit him more for, like, Winnie the Pooh or whoever else, I want him to voice, like you know, watch the Diamond Cutter podcast. It's very good indeed. You know, that kind of
like I mean, you talk about sinister. Like he's got his nephew Snively as his
like his lapdog sidekick, whatever.
Like
wait, Snively was his nephew?
Yeah. It's
I didn't know that.
Wasn't it?
I don't know if they touched on it in the show, but it was well established in the comic book that that's his nephew.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
And they had their army of SWAT bots that really reminded me between the music and the mood and the SWAT bots. It really reminded me of Star Wars. When that was my first impression when I first saw like that 5-minute preview was like Star Wars. So it's just more serious.
I mean, it's kind of like Star Wars in general because you have this ragtag rebellion against this gigantic empire. I mean, again, the comics, they sort of lay more of the groundwork insofar as establishing, like, you have this very rustic society against this very mechanical society. They got more into, like, the ecological themes of, like, nature versus, like, the comic was originally aimed a little bit more at kids, too, so you had some very simplistic but well-meaning messages about the environment and being against pollution and things like that. And then, you know, it's dealt with in a more general sense in the cartoon. But yeah, it was always a major fundamentalist thing, you know. So there was that angle to it. Robotnik was, you know, not necessarily Darth Vader, but he was supposed to give you off that similar vibe, you know. Got Dr. Claw. You got that. He's got like Dr. Claw / Mr. Burns. Excellent.
Yeah.
Snively.
Oh man.
Yeah,
now, another thing also,
you could totally see him being a power top with Snively.
No God. Another thing with the games that they included the power rings in the games, which apparently in this version they made Sonic, I guess, run even faster or something.
Yeah, they enhance abilities. Yeah, they can enhance your abilities. They're generally used to make Sonic go faster, but I think they also do other things if you want them to. It's just that's pretty much his gimmick. So that's
the plot MacGuffin thing.
Yeah, I believe like if somebody else wanted to use them for a different kind of enhancement, it would work just as well. It's just that it's usually him using them.
And then let me see what happens. Oh yeah, we also got the story with Uncle Chuck that also came from the comics that was introduced here and everything.
Yep, Sonic's Uncle Chuck, who was captured and turned into a robot, but he was able to get some of his free will back, so he was like the double agent that would be the go-between. He would send Robotnik's plans to Sally and Sonic and the Freedom Fighters, and then they would use them to counterattack and everything like that. Like, I really loved the story. I really did. Again, the comics helped lay a lot of the groundwork. If you were reading the comic for a year by the time the show came out, you know, you knew what you were getting into with the show, and you were ready for it, and you were primed for it. So seeing it play out in motion was really cool. And, you know, it's like an interesting story. You know, it's in many. It's not a new story. You know, the underdog rebellion against the evil alliance, but it always works. It's a very well worn kind of story, but it always works. That's why people revisit it.
I was wondering something. Didn't Chuck finally turn at the end though, when he finally lost it?
Well, I mean, eventually they were able to get him to be back. He didn't get his body back, but he got his free will back full time. At one point,
Well,
he
it
almost
was?
lost it, but yeah.
I must be remembering it wrong then.
Yeah, it was. He ended up. They found him out as a spy though in season 2, so he had to go live at Knothole with the Freedom Fighters permanently after that.
Oh, okay, it's coming back. It's coming back. It's coming back. Okay.
Yeah. 'Cause
Now,
they
one thing
discovered he
is,
was a
did they ever
spy.
roboticize other people? Because, like, I know Uncle Chuck, and of course, Bunny was, halfway, right? But, like, who else got roboticized? Because all the SWAT bots they're just regular robots, right? Sonic's not just fucking innocent people up, right? Whenever he blows them up and shit, right? Like,
I
Oh
believe.
crap! I never thought of
I
that.
believe in the canon of the comic and the show that if you're turned into a robot, you just kind of look like a robot version of you, whereas the SWAT bots and so forth are built from the ground up.
yeah, I hope so, because a lot of them get smashed up,
Yeah, they're like robot stormtroopers in that respect. But yeah, like so for example, Uncle Chuck got turned into a robot and he just looks like a robot version of him.
Yeah.
See, this does sometimes present plot holes. For example, an episode I watched, and again, I love the show, but nothing is perfect, and there are certain inconsistencies that pop up. So, I mean, and the episode kind of addresses it. There's an episode where he kidnaps Sally, and he tries to get at Sonic using a robot duplicate of her, and that's like, okay, cool, but like he doesn't think to turn her into a robot until way late in the episode. It's like, well, you could have probably just done that in the first place or at the same time, but I don't know. Kind of like he waited too long and it backfires on him, obviously. But it's like,
Yeah.
well, if you just
This
did that first.
that feels like an Austin Powers moment when they're poking fun at like the thing with the laser sharks in the tank, and it's like they left the room even though they should have stayed to see that everything went through. But that's how the villains do things in those kind of movies.
It's consistent
Which
with
was
the
a
lore,
joke.
though. In the comic and the cartoon, like him trying to turn Sally into a robot's been consistent from the beginning. Like he has a real. Again, some people dislike this version of the story because it's more about him and her, in a sense, because it's her family that got deposed, and like she's the one who's destined to be the ruler and everything. So it's her planet they're fighting to take back. It's her parents they're trying to find and everything like that. So the really personal part of the story is between Sally and Robotnik. That's really what's driving the plot. Some people don't like that, but I think it just enriches everything else that's going on. But yeah, along the way, one of Robotnik's consistent plots has always been to specifically kidnap or get her and turn her into a robot one way
or overall, because they're hidden
various
somewhere. They're
degrees.
hidden in Knothole Village, and it's hidden. And also their plots are also finding the hidden location of Knothole Village to stop them all and everything.
Yeah, it's like and they end up having to move around a couple of times too. Like they get found out a couple times in the comics. The comics become their totally own thing after too long because they outlived the show by decades.
Oh yeah.
The show was on the air for 2 seasons, but the comic starring the characters ran for fucking 20 some years. So
I always thought it was kind of crazy because the first issue started off minus the Freedom Fighters, but you had all the video game enemies and stuff, because again
Freedom Fighters
you only
were in the
had 2
first-
Sonic games, right? Then
the Freedom
it
Fighters were in the
went,
first comic.
huh?
The Freedom Fighters were in the first issue.
Yeah, they were, but I mean, they fought more of the video game enemies and junk like that, So they had these created characters that would be in the cartoon or whatever. The game
Right.
would slowly create more characters like Knuckles and Knack the Weasel and stuff like that, and Amy Rose, Metal Sonic that would be in the comic too. You have this long hiatus where Sonic was dead until, the Dreamcast came out because they never made a Saturn game. So during that entire hiatus, they had other villains and things. There was a part where they defeated Robotnik once and for all. So now they created a whole bunch of other new villains. Then Sonic Adventure comes out with all new characters too. So the comic book got jammed with characters from the Saturday morning cartoon, the older games, a whole bunch of made up new villains or whatever to fill in the gap. And then all the adventures characters like Rouge and Big the Cat, and like it became a giant jambalaya, man.
The comic was probably the biggest casualty of the fact that Sega of Japan and Sega of America never really communicated well or got along. Because across the board, Sega of America and Sega of Japan at that period of time, right down to the development of the Saturn, the development release of the 32X, that whole fiasco, the Neptune console that never came out. If you know the history, which I'm sure you do, because you guys are video game masters.
Yeah, I was reading those magazines, all the months and everything. Wasn't Neptune supposed to be like a Genesis and 32X, but like as a console without the hookup thing or whatever, but it never came out?
If you know about these things, then you already know that historically, Sega of Japan and Sega of America were not on the same page at all at this time.
They weren't even in the same book most of the time, honestly.
That extended to their handling of the Sonic franchise and what it was supposed to be. This affected more the comics because the cartoons were already canceled and in reruns by this point. But, the comic became very conflicted about what they could and couldn't do. At one point, they were going to kill off Sally, but then the fan outcry was literally way too much, so they unkilled her and brought her back because people were just outraged. They were like, well, we won't let you do this. You can't do this.
Do you want to go into the Ken Penders story? Did you check that one?
And then Sega of Japan actually had planned to, at that time, use the Freedom Fighters in a game. It didn't pan out, but that was Sega of Japan's plan. And also there was they were using the characters at a theme park, a Sega-based theme park, and they had statues of Sonic and Sally and stuff like that. So they're like, you can't kill off this character. You need to keep her around. But like you said, then they had to incorporate the Sonic Adventure stuff and all these other things. And so, because the two branches of Sega didn't know how to do anything at the same pace or the same time, and because they couldn't agree on how Sonic could be handled in any media, even if they had Sally, they were like, was she his girlfriend? Okay, she was designed to be that, but then they had to walk it back because they couldn't agree on whether the fan base was 10-year-olds or people who were 10 in 92 and were 15 now, They couldn't decide if they wanted the brand to grow up with the audience or if they wanted it to just constantly be aimed at little kids. Like whether it was 93 or 99, they're like, we're aiming for the 10-year-olds with this. That affected the book because Sega originally designed Sally just for the purpose of being Sonic's girlfriend. That was her entire raison d'etre. I'm going to find a reason to work that in every show we do. But anyway, so that was literally her function. And thankfully, the cartoon gave her a lot more depth than that to work with. She wasn't just the girlfriend character. There was a lot of will they, won't they. There was a little bit of Zelda Link going on in there with their sometimes playful antagonistic relationship. But she was designed to be the girlfriend or whatever. But then when it came to the comic book side of it, they were like, well, I don't know, boys don't buy comic books with characters making kissy face at each other. So maybe we won't have them do that. It's like, but that's like saying Superman can't kiss Lois. Like that's the only reason Lois is in the fucking story. It's the only reason they created Lois.
But I just have something to say about that. Superman cannot kiss Lois because he has Wonder Woman.
Well, that was in the New 52. That got wiped out. But
New 52 is not.
Yeah. Oh no, it's not. In my mind, the New 52 never existed. But I just felt like bringing that up.
That was interesting thing here. That was an interesting case with a guy, with one of the artists named Ken Penders or Penders. I forgot the last name.
That's
where he created sorry?
That fucking asshole.
Yeah. So he created like a whole bunch of he basically created an extended family for Knuckles, where all the characters look like Knuckles, but with a mustache, a beard, a cap, whatever. Like just get the extended cast and everything.
Well, kidneys are a very homogenous species, Kidneys are a very homogenous species.
Yeah, they were very Alabama-ish, I should say. So, anyways, no, not literally, Johnny. I'm just joking because y'all look.
Oh well,
time making that face like, what? But,
time for the canceling.
Yeah. So, anyways, what happened was there was this game that came out later. I think it was Sonic and the Secret Rings or whatever that had a very similar plot with similar enemies. So Penders felt I don't even care how his last name is.
Dark Brotherhood. It was Sonic and the Dark Brotherhood.
Yeah. So he thought it was ripping off on his idea, and he wanted to sue or whatever and say that they're his characters. There was a big dispute because, technically speaking, it's still tied to Sonic and a Sega game. They're not your characters. And he went into the whole thing where you get, like, you make a Spider-Man story, you create, Dr. I don't know, Crazy Pants or whatever. Like, you don't get paid for that character coming back after you've already been paid to make that issue.
It's called a standard work for hire agreement.
Yeah. There you go. That's why when we do our video game masters, we don't pay Ninja Panda and them because he's only a work for hire for that episode, or Jack Knives. I'm kidding.
I mean, like, if a creator has ownership of a character, that is a front end negotiation.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah. So they went to court, and
when Todd McFarlane created Spawn, okay, it was written down contractually, bound in ink and blood. Todd McFarlane owns this character. Before the first issue ever saw print, it was already established and negotiated. Image Comics, the publisher, does not own this character of Spawn. Todd McFarlane does.
Yeah.
Very clear and implicitly understood. No mistake about it. This is how it works. It was a front-end negotiation. If you write for Superman and you create Dr. Emil Hamilton to be a secondary character, okay? If you want to own that character, you have to make that clear up front to your publisher, the person who's paying you for your derivative work, and you have to establish all of that up front. There's never any mystery about whether or not a creator owns the character that they're putting into print. You're hired to develop that character, unless you come up with it and shop it to them, in which case that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
But so, in the case of Ken Penders, yeah, he created a lot of characters, not just the echidnas. He pretty much did create the entire backstory for Knuckles. Yes, he did. Knuckles, as a character, had no real backstory in any media before he gave him one. True story. He was just the guardian of the floating island. That's all anybody had. Yeah. He came up with the rest. Okay, golf clap for you, Ken Penders. But he also created Sally's family and their backstory, which was very important.
And Scourge.
He created a good 90% of the supporting cast because he got in early on the editing side and then became a writer. So yeah, he did do a lot of good stuff. His problem as a writer, though, like, he was always a big fan of spy novels and shit like that. So he liked mysteries, he liked twists and turns, but he wasn't good at resolution. He had a bad habit of introducing characters and storylines and playing them out like 2/3 of the way and then dropping them and leaving them open-ended.
Oh, he must be working for Tony Khan.
Right? So the intention was always to come back and finish them later, but then later never came. And so the writing really suffered like around issue 100 something and then after, because it got very convoluted. Yeah. Because now, again, between the games, the cartoon, and everything being merged together, it was cluttered, but also the old plots were not being resolved to make way for the new plots. Yeah. So that got into trouble when he filed the stupid lawsuit claiming he owned all this shit. Yeah. That comes back to the work for hire agreement, because no, you don't, guy. But Archie,
here's the funny part is Archie Comics lost the original agreement. Like, they couldn't find it anywhere.
They couldn't find a simple piece of fucking paper. They couldn't find a simple piece of paper. Who does your bookkeeping?
They took a fucking photocopy, and the court would not admit it because it's a photocopy. We need, like, the actual real document or whatever. So he actually won the case, and he owns those characters, you know. Yeah. But the funny thing is that Archie was like, okay, you own them, but guess what? We'll wipe it from existence. Fuck you.
Yeah, yeah, they couldn't. Yeah, it was upsetting. It hurt if you were a fan from 92 onward, because you had a lot of emotional investment in those characters, you know, and it was such a petty and stupid thing to happen. Like, he's a small, petty man, Ken Penders. He also fucked up. I found this out when I was doing my research. The show got canceled. There was supposed to be a third season. Didn't happen. The writer, Ben Hurst, was shopping an animated movie in 2002 based on the Saturday morning cartoon to basically do what season 3 would have done. It would have come out in theaters, and it was going to be the big finale that the show didn't get. So he got everybody on board with it, and Ken Penders had something to do with licensing at that point for Sonic stuff. So it had to go through him at some point. So at some point when Ken Penders communicated it to the people upstairs, shall we say, it got all twisted around, and all of a sudden nobody wanted to do it. And furthermore, he was going to come up with his own Sonic animated movie that was going to come out in theaters, and he would get the writing credit and the paycheck. So very suspicious, you know. He basically killed off one project out of pettiness because he had his own project in the back pocket, you know.
Yeah.
So he robbed the fans of this show the closure that they would have gotten from that movie. He robbed the writer of that show out of a paycheck because he would have written the animated movie that would have been the wrap up. And and then when he won the stupid lawsuit, he got to keep all those fucking characters. So he basically wiped out the comic. The comic essentially had to start over.
Yeah. Basically, they did this clever thing where Sonic crossed over with Mega Man, and Wily and Robotnik, or I guess Dr. Eggman, had this thing called the Genesis Wave. So when the story ended, at least in Mega Man, things went back to normal. You could just keep buying the Mega Man comics, whatever. But when it went to Sonic, they did a big Genesis Wave that literally wiped out all the characters that were not from the game. So going onwards, now would literally only be like the game characters from Sonic Adventure, you know, Rouge and Big the Cat and Knuckles, Silver, Shadow, all them characters. And Archie Comics eventually got canceled. It was the longest running comic book based on a video game. And it's somewhere in the genus Guinness, right? Guinness World.
It was, yeah. It probably still is in the Guinness Book of World Records, yeah. It was the longest running licensed comic book. Mario didn't have a comic that lasted very long at all. No. Zelda, you know, all of them. Every video game that had a comic book back then, it ran for a few issues and then nothing.
Yeah.
I remember at the time almost being surprised there was a new issue every month. And come to find out, so was Archie sometimes. People working there said that for like the first couple of years, like the first 5 years, they were always sure that they were going to get canceled next month.
Oh, wow.
They always wrote the book that way. Like we might only have like 2 months to wrap anything up. So let's not get too intense with our storylines and stuff or leave too many plot threads. We're like, we do want to have some kind of resolution. But yeah, then there was, you know, it was interesting because the show and the comic, you know, they really affected each other in a lot of different ways. My system shut off for some reason, don't know why. But yeah, you know, a lot of the same characters were shared, so that means there was a lot of a audience for them, and unfortunately that audience was deprived going forward. These characters will probably never come back.
Yeah.
Not in official sense anyway, although there is there's that fan group project. Season 3. That's interesting. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. Like, so for those who don't know, there's an online group that's been working on a fan-made 3rd season of the Saturday morning show. And it looks pretty cool. They have a different cast, obviously. They don't have the original voice actors, but they have sound alike. Sounds pretty good. Visually, it looks just like the show, so I'm impressed with that. You know, I wish them well. I'm not sure exactly when it's supposed to come out, but I've seen a little bit of the preview stuff for it. Looks pretty cool. You guys seen any of that?
Yeah, it's on the drone. I've seen like the previews and stuff. They usually update, but you know, it's been going on for a couple of years. It's a big heavy project, so I'm looking forward to whenever they release it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it was kind of a shame. Like we talked about, it didn't get the planned 3rd season. It ended on the resolution of the Robotnik plotline, which was good. Mm-hmm. Season 2, as I mentioned, that was more serialized in a sense. That was going to continue into season 3, and if they had done more, it was going to be beyond that. They get more into trying to rescue Sally's family. They find out they go back in time to try to stop Robotnik's plan before it gets going.
Yeah.
And that was a really, really great 2-part episode. That was one of the better episodes in the show, I think. They couldn't stop it, but they managed to save their nanny Rosie from getting turned into a robot. So when they go back to the present day, she's there where she wasn't before. So that was cool. It was at the end of the series, so she never showed up again. But I mean, it was, if the show had continued, she would have been a recurring character. So that was neat. Time travel episode there. So yeah, they finish the last episode. They get rid of Robotnik. They get the deep power stones, and Sonic and Sally together blow up Robotnik's doomsday weapon and him with it. And he's gone. Then Snively, he's talking to somebody at the end of the last episode, and you see his glowing eyes and the evil laughter and everything like that. So there was a lot of speculation as to who that was and what was going to happen with that. That was going to be the villain of season 3. So that would have been Naugus the Wizard, who was in the void that Princess Sally's dad was banished to. They found that out earlier in the show. Robotnik had banished Sally's father to this weird phantom zone-like dimension, and he couldn't leave or return to Crystal. So he had to stay there, and he was trapped there with this evil wizard who Robotnik had double-crossed and banished there as well. So that would have been the villain for season 3 if they'd have gotten to do that. So again, they were planting seeds as they went along for this bigger payoff in the 3rd season that they never got to do. So that was really unfortunate. But you know, what can you do? That's fucking showbiz, right? But the show did okay. It got about almost 5 million viewers watched it at its peak during season 2. So that's pretty good. Because that was the season where they were moving the time slot around. That is what pissed me off more than anything. I have to want to rant about that real quick. Because I was a big fan of the fucking show, but I hated getting up in the fucking morning. Even as a kid, I did not like to get up early. But I would set my alarm to get up and watch the show. It would be in TV Guide. It would say ABC, 10 o'clock. I'd make sure I was up to watch it. It would be on the preview channel. I'd get up, I'd turn on the preview channel. Remember that scrolling gimmick?
Yeah.
TV Guide channel or whatever. It would say, yep, ABC, 10 o'clock, Sonic the Hedgehog. And I would turn it on. It would be the fucking Free Willy cartoon.
That was a Free Willy cartoon?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
That's how I found out. I fucked around and found out. But could you believe it? You fucking get up. There was one time, at least one time, I was so adamant about not missing it that I stayed up all night. Figure I'll go to bed at 11 in the morning. It's Saturday. Fuck it. And I did that just to watch the Sonic cartoon. And because it was in the TV Guide. And I figured, okay, their block starts at like 8. So I'm just going to put ABC on and watch ABC and not change the channel because one way or the other, I'm watching this fucking show. and that would be a week that they preempted it entirely. Didn't put it on at all, even though it was in the fucking TV Guide and everything. I'm like, these motherfuckers.
That fucking sucks.
There was it would have been on, but it would have been on at 9, but TV Guide said it was on at 10, and it was like, what the fuck are you guys doing over there?
I know I had that issue. Like, I never knew when it was going to come on. And with the thing with us, because even for my area, CBS even stopped showing, like, Saturday morning programming, like, early. So, like I said, like, I had, like with Ninja Turtles, I had no idea there was a Red Sky season or any of that other stuff or all those changes. Because, I mean, I never saw those because we always had stuff preempted for news and Martha Stewart. And with ABC, it got preempted for, like, news shows a lot. So when Sonic would be on, it I never knew it. So, like, it was very sporadic with the episodes.
And this was the thing, man. Like, this is one reason why it doesn't necessarily have the best reputation, because a lot of people saw it when it came out on DVD. Because if you didn't watch it during its first run and you didn't catch it on USA for a year after that, then you really didn't get to see this fucking show. So people who saw it for the first time in 2005 or whatever, forget when the DVDs came out. I'm fortunate enough to have the complete series run from Shout Factory, which is really expensive now. I got it the day it came out. wouldn't miss it. But yeah, like people looking back on it in 2006 or whatever, they were not really all that kind to it. Keep in mind they're watching the show from 1993. I remember watching it in 1993, and it was the shit. It was very cutting edge for a Saturday morning kids program. I watched other Saturday morning cartoons at the time on many channels still, and this show was way fucking better than almost any other cartoon it was on at the time. Like Ninja Turtles stepped its game up a little bit, so that was doing good. But I mean, you know, you were competing with shit like fucking the Dumb and Dumber cartoon, which who even remembers that bullshit?
Oh God.
Or the fucking Mask. Who remembers that bullshit? Or the
I
fucking
remember those
Ralph
shows
Wilson voiced that
existed.
one.
Yeah, he did. I remember those shows. I know. And what I do remember about is that I watched neither of them,
they
including Free
existed.
Willy.
They existed. But they were fucking bullshit. It was the fucking Ace Ventura cartoon. It was fucking bullshit. Those were
Remember
the
that? I
shows,
didn't watch that either.
those were the other shows that were on Saturday mornings at the time that the Sonic Saturday
Now,
morning show was out. So
now, to my knowledge, I thought the main thing that was really, really killing it was Power Rangers.
I didn't watch that. See, I sometimes
No, but
watch
I thought that
reruns.
a lot, but I do know a lot of people that were. So like I always figured that it was Power Rangers that was really killing a lot of the Sonic stuff. And it kind of goes because that was always my reason for why it probably got canceled because Power Rangers killed it and it kept getting preempted. That's what I always thought back then. Because I was like upset when I was like, what do you mean we're not getting another 3? How did it end like that? I was legit upset with that ending because I didn't read the comics. I didn't even know the comics existed like way after the fact.
It was really hard to like I said, if you were trying to watch that shit, it was hard to keep up with. They sabotaged it in a sense. They sabotaged their own show. You know what I mean? I'm staying up all night to watch the shit, and then it's not even on when I go to sit down and watch it. It was a real heartbreaker for me. But I got to watch it on USA actually shortly after. When USA got it in '96, I taped it, so I would get to catch up on the episodes I missed. That was really cool. A lot of the characters from the show got incorporated into the comic later on, like Lupe and the Wolf Pack. That was cool. That was like the show was where they established there were other pocket branches of freedom fighters all over the place, and then they had to like find them so they could link up and provide a unified front against Robotnik. So that was something they incorporated into the comic after the show went off the air. It was pretty cool. Yes, they had a lot of cool stuff going on. Like I said, I loved the expanded lore, the expanded cast of characters. I liked that it was aged up a little bit for an older audience with the darker tone, darker themes. Artistically, like I said, I watched a little bit of Adventures of Sonic and then jumped right to the Saturday morning show back to back, and it's like, holy shit. Like I see which show got 95% of Geek's animation budget. Oh, so that's what backgrounds look like. I had almost forgotten.
Johnny, do you remember the comics at all?
Look majestic. It's a very well done show. Like that's the thing. It doesn't look or sound like the games, but in and of itself, the art and the music is fucking immaculate for 1993. Like, it is fucking immaculate. I don't care what anybody says. It looks and sounds great. I love it.
Johnny, do you remember the comics, give or take, sort of, from back then?
I think there was like the Archie comics.
Yes.
Not too much, but I did kind of notice it's kind of mixed up between the Adventures of Sonic and then the Saturday cartoons, kind of like a mix and match, I guess. But other than that, I don't really remember the comic book that much.
Yeah. Those are probably the comic books we were buying. Was issue 0 the one where Sally was captured, but she got captured on purpose because she wanted to see how the robotization worked, and the Sonic and them saved her, and she got pissed because what the fuck you saved me for? Trying to plan.
That wasn't 0, but I don't
1?
think. But that was an early one. I have 0. I haven't read it in a while. I have all of them up to very late in the series. Like I have all of it up to 2009. And after that, I'm missing a few, but I have everything up to that point. I'm literally like, that's probably the most expensive shit in my comic collection, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Because I've seen the first issue 0, go for like a couple $100 now,
No.
depending. Because it's the first printed appearance of Sally and all these other characters, and they become notorious since then. But
Yeah.
everybody has their own opinion on the Freedom Fighters secondary cast. Some people they don't belong there at all. Some people wish they were gone completely. Some people were happy they got erased, that they're not in the new comics and stuff. But I like them a lot. They exist, so everybody's got a favorite or a least favorite. Like, what are some of your picks of the sidekicks? Let's say aside from Sonic and Tails, because they're the easy ones, but let's say among the rest of the cast. Favorites, least favorites? Start with that real quick before we move on.